So I recently played through Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and the only reason you're seeing this review is because a guy who I used to work with wanted me to play it so badly that he lent me his VCR. Though what you're seeing here is footage from the toaster, because I don't have the tools to capture footage from the current-gen systems. Anyways, his only reason being that he thought I'd like the campaign. I'm not making this up. And did I like it? Well, yeah. Sort of. It's kind of weird because Infinite Warfare isn't a bad game, it's a disappointing one. Because just like Black Ops 2, which was the last Call of Duty game I played before this one back in late 2012, I didn't play these three and I'm probably never going to. Anyways, just like Black Ops 2, Infinite Warfare had a lot of potential, but threw most of it away. And that's really sad because there were plenty of things that I liked about this game. I like the future setting and the art style, and that's what everyone hates for reasons I've never been able to understand. People are saying that it looked too much like Halo. I don't know where people are getting that from. Save for the Raven, which is basically the Pelican, I couldn't find any similarities. Maybe it's the big starships, but come on guys, the ships from both franchises look like gray blobs with 40,000 pieces glued to them. Or maybe I wasn't looking hard enough, because number one, I don't care if Infinite Warfare did rip off Halo, and number two, the artwork in this game is great. Probably the best the franchise has ever had. I love the way this game looks, and for the record, the Raven looks 10 times cooler than the Pelican. The story too, while it's not anything great and is hampered down by a lot of cheesy writing, has not only traditional cutscenes that require precise timing and actual camera work, instead of just leaving you in first person the entire time, but also a main character with a face and voice. He's not just some generically named silent grunt who ends up feeling like a casting director for the other characters to act at and not with. He has an actual persona, so you can feel like you're actually playing as someone and like you're actually involved in the story. I know this isn't anything new to the franchise because Black Ops 2 had this, but it's still light years ahead of what we typically get. He's not a bad character, and the supporting cast isn't half bad either. Ethan in particular is fucking awesome. I love this guy. He's the coolest thing to ever happen to Call of Duty, and the most human out of any character I've ever seen in this franchise, which is really ironic considering he's a robot, but it just ends up making him an even better character.
Captain Alderney, first troop ready model. Quite remarkable. We're revealing him at the ceremony today.
You know I get stage fright, right, sir?
You got feelings, Ethan?
I do, Lieutenant. I do. I carry the brain of a human farmer.
Holy shit, are you serious?
No, ma'am, not at all.
He got you, Lieutenant.
Did not.
And overall, the story gives off a good sense that there was some actual time, care, and most importantly, love put into making it. The cutscenes after the levels on Saturn and Mercury are my prime examples. They give off some very real emotion, tension, and even drama. I could explain it more, but it's better if you go and play them yourself. They're pretty darn good, and infinitely better than the typical military jargon that we've gotten in almost every Call of Duty. Pun only slightly intended on that last sentence. Specialist difficulty, which you get after beating the game once, I also enjoyed very much, even though it might want to make you rip your hair out of your head because it's so fucking difficult. Bullets do a lot more damage and can have a very real effect on how your character performs depending on where they hit. A bullet to the arm and you can't aim your gun, a bullet to the leg can cripple you, and you can only heal yourself with nanoshots, which are basically health packs that you have to find. And you also have to look out for extra helmets, because if your helmet gets destroyed, one shot to the face and you're dead. One time I died on the second level just as Nick jumped out of the Raven, and I took a bullet to the face before he could put his helmet on. Which never happened again, but still, just to give you guys an idea as to what you're in store for. Furthermore, there's a bunch of times where you can fly a starfighter called the Jackal, and you have full control over it, which absolutely amazed me. Sure, you have to watch out for the obligatory combat zones, but as long as you stay inside those zones, you can fly around and blow shit up as you please. I thought it was going to be an on-rails thing because it was after the first time you got full control, but that was it. Every other time you had full control, and there's also plenty of side missions that you could complete to unlock upgrades for it, and even upgrades for Nick. Some of which could be found in the main missions, and once you beat the game, you can replay any level with all of your upgrades that you found, and still continue to unlock any others that you missed. The side missions in general have this almost unbelievable level of freedom that I don't remember ever seeing in Call of Duty. And they were somewhat fun to play because they're not just jackal flights. You also board enemy ships to either steal or kill something. And it's a damn shame that this level of freedom only happens in the side missions, because the main missions follow the standard Call of Duty formula almost to the letter. You know, the formula we've all grown to know and hate with a passion, where you're jammed through on a fast track through a slap-you-silly linear level design, constantly interrupted by scripted events or some other bullshit, given no room to breathe, and enough guns going off at all hours of the day to send you into a sensory overload breakdown. Look, to be fair, the main missions aren't as heavily scripted as previous games, and as I said before, half the cutscenes are traditional, but the other half are first-person. And what I don't understand is that after you play through the game once, you can skip the traditional cutscenes, but not the first-person cutscenes. And they still happen quite often, even with small things like this.
Reaper, we're in R&D. Moving to the armory.
Copy. Be advised. SDF is almost inside. Operation Riot cannot succeed. Once the weapon is secure, I can activate the self-destruct sequence.
Copy.
This happens all the time in the main missions. Why did the game suddenly stop gameplay in the middle of the level and disable everything but movement in the camera while slowing my movement down to a crawl just so one of the characters could spout off some random 2 lines of dialogue? Things like this irritate me more than anything else in Call of Duty. There is no reason to interrupt the gameplay like this in the middle of a level. None. The characters could still easily spout off whatever they have to say, and I could still have full control over my character. Now let's go back to the Specialist difficulty. I do like it, but at times it also reminds me of those games back in the 80s and 90s that borderlined on fake difficulty mainly due to bad design choices. Because, unfortunately, there are plenty of times throughout Infinite Warfare where the enemies infinitely respawn. It doesn't happen nearly as often as the previous games that I played, but it always seems to happen at the worst possible moments, and I have to time everything right, ranging from what weapons I use to when I move. On one hand, I really do enjoy this challenge, because once I beat those sections, I'm practically on top of the world. But on the other hand, constant interruption of the game is the only thing I hate in Call of Duty more than infinite respawns. And that makes some of these areas absolutely retarded in terms of how tough they are. I was enjoying the Specialist difficulty until I got to these areas, and then the fun just went completely out the window. And many times, when I reloaded the last checkpoint, it was at a first-person cutscene, and let me tell you something, when you're getting your ass handed to you in a video game, you don't care about any of that story bullshit or what anyone has to say, you just want to fucking kill the thing that keeps killing you. So having to constantly restart and sit through those first-person cutscenes is more rage-inducing than the moments that keep killing you themselves. And let's go back to the Jackals for a moment, because I said you had full control over them, and you do. In Specialist mode. The difference is in the targeting, and I tried this with every other difficulty. When you lock onto an enemy fighter, your fighter will then follow them on its own, as you're seeing right here. It reminds me of Ace Combat Assault Horizon's dogfight mode. It's pretty much the same thing. Now you try it on Specialist, and look at this. All of a sudden you have to follow the enemy fighter yourself and keep the targeting reticule centered, even though it does sort of auto-target when you pull the trigger, but it's not anywhere near what it's like on any other difficulty. And I haven't found a way to make this apply to the lower difficulties, and that really sucks, because dogfighting on any difficulty other than Specialist is a fucking joke. There's no challenge, no skill, just one giant disappointment. And one more thing, I also wish the gunplay could have been more focused. Most of the guns still feel like weak, spring-loaded airsoft pistols, and even though we have multiple versions of every single type of gun, all of them feel like the exact same thing with a different skin slapped on it. Very rarely did I find the weapons fun or satisfying to use. And that's pretty much it. I didn't play zombies or multiplayer because that's just not my speed. And overall, the reason I say Infinite Warfare is disappointing is because while it did use a great deal of its potential, and it tried very hard to break away from the standard Call of Duty formula, it also feels like it was afraid to fully make that jump. If the main missions were more like the side missions, and weren't so scripted, if the enemies didn't infinitely respawn at all, and at the very least there was an option for the lock-on aspect of Specialist in the lower difficulties, my opinion of Infinite Warfare would probably be considerably higher. It's worth renting for the campaign, but it could have been worth so much more if it had just done some things differently and used more of its potential. Because there are other things in the campaign that I didn't talk about in this review, where it was setting itself up for something that could have been really memorable and amazing, but then threw it all away and reverted right back to the standard formula. I suspect, probably correctly, that the Genghis Khan wannabe running Activision, who we all know as Bobby Kotick, had something to do with this. But overall, I'd say rent Infinite Warfare or borrow it from a friend. At the very least, it's worth one playthrough and some experimenting with Specialist mode.